The war room fell silent as another star system blinked red on the tactical display. Ambassador Kelthar watched his 4 crystalline arms trembling slightly. 3 solar cycles of fighting, and the coalition was losing badly. The Vrixtal swarm consumed everything in its path. They were insects, each the size of a ground transport, with mandibles that could tear through ship hulls. Worse, they thought as one mind. Every battle against them felt like fighting a single massive organism that learned from every encounter. High Commander Vross spread his wings in frustration. The avian officer had led coalition forces for 20 years, but nothing in his experience prepared him for this enemy. "We need to fall back to the core systems," he announced to the assembled leaders. "Outer reach cannot hold." Kelthar felt his hope dying. Outer reach was more than a star system. It was the gateway to half the civilized galaxy. If it fell, billions would die before the swarm could be stopped. Maybe they couldn't be stopped at all. "The humans are here," someone said from the back of the room. Vross made a sound that translated roughly to a dismissive laugh. "The humans? What can they possibly do?" Kelthar shared the sentiment. Humans were the newest members of the Galactic Coalition, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. They were primitives playing at galactic politics. Their technology was centuries behind the major powers. Their military was small and untested. "They're offering assistance," the communications officer continued. "A fleet of 30 ships. 30 ships, Vross repeated. "We've lost 300 in the last cycle alone. Thank them politely and tell them to stay out of the way." But the council overruled him. Every ship mattered now, even human ones. Kelthar found himself assigned as liaison to the human fleet. He recognized the assignment for what it was, a demotion disguised as diplomacy. His opposition to some council policies had made him unpopular. Now he would babysit primitives, while real warriors fought and died. The human flagship was smaller than he expected. The vessel looked blocky and ugly compared to the elegant ships of the coalition. Kelthar transported aboard with low expectations. Commander Tae Yang met him in the docking bay. The human was average height for his species, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wore a simple uniform with few decorations. What struck Kelthar immediately was the man's absolute stillness. Most species showed some nervous movement, a wing flutter, a tail twitch, something. Tae Yang stood as motionless as a statue. "Ambassador," Tae Yang said with a slight bow, "welcome aboard the Defiant." "Commander," Kelthar replied, trying to keep the disappointment from his voice. "The Council appreciates your assistance in this difficult time." "We're not here to assist," Tae Yang said calmly. "We're here to fight." The distinction seemed meaningless to Kelthar, but he said nothing. Tae Yang led him through corridors that smelled of recycled air and something else, something sharp that Kelthar couldn't identify. The ship's interior was purely functional. No art, no decoration, nothing but efficient design. They entered the command center where a woman stood studying holographic displays of the battlefield. She turned as they approached, and Kelthar saw the same unsettling stillness in her eyes. "This is Hai-In, our chief tactical officer," Tae Yang introduced. Hai-In nodded to Kelthar, then immediately returned to her analysis. "The coalition has been fighting defensively for 3 cycles," she said without preamble. "Always reacting to swarm movements, never initiating. The swarm's coordination makes offensive operations impossible," Kelthar explained, slightly annoyed at the implied criticism. "They adapt too quickly. Every attack we've launched has ended in disaster. Because you fight with honor," Hai-In said, highlighting sections of the battlefield. "You announce your attacks with proper military protocols. You avoid civilian infrastructure even when it would provide tactical advantage. You retreat when casualties reach acceptable thresholds." "Of course," Kelthar said. "We are civilized beings, not animals." Something flickered across Hayin's face. It might have been amusement. The Vrixtal don't care about honor. They care about survival and expansion. You can't fight them with one hand tied behind your back. Kelthar felt his skin shifting through frustrated colors. Are you suggesting we abandon the principles that separate us from mindless beasts? I'm suggesting you want to win, Tae Yang said quietly. His voice held no judgment, just statement of fact. Over the next 2 days, Kelthar observed the humans with growing unease. They requested detailed intelligence on every swarm encounter, casualty reports, communication intercepts, even salvaged Vrixtal corpses. They studied the enemy with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Hayin presented her analysis to the coalition commanders. Kelthar attended the briefing and watched the assembled officers grow increasingly uncomfortable. You've been treating the swarm as a conventional military force, Hayin explained, her presentation crisp and devastating. But they're not. They're a hive organism. Kill enough drones, and they replace them. Destroy their ships, and they build more. You can't win a war of attrition against an enemy that reproduces faster than you can kill them. Then how do you suggest we proceed? High Commander Vross asked, his tone icy. Target the queens, Hayin said simply. Each swarm fleet operates around a queen ship. The drones can't function independently for long without queen guidance. Kill the queen, and the entire fleet becomes disorganized. We know this, Vross snapped. Queen ships are buried deep in the center of their formations, surrounded by thousands of drones. Reaching them is suicide. Not if you're willing to do what they don't expect, Tae Yang said. Not if you're willing to fight the way we fight. And how do humans fight? Kelthar found himself asking. Tae Yang met his eyes, and for the first time, Kelthar saw something in those dark depths. Not cruelty exactly, but something that made his crystalline structure shiver. We fight to win, Tae Yang said softly. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. We don't stop until the enemy can never threaten us again. The briefing ended with Vross grudgingly agreeing to let the humans assess the situation before committing to their own tactics. Kelthar escorted Tae Yang back to the transport. Your people are very confident, Kelthar observed. Perhaps overconfident. You've never faced anything like the Vrixtal. No, Tae Yang agreed, but we've faced each other. For 10,000 years, humans fought humans. We know war in ways you can't imagine. The Vrixtal are dangerous, Ambassador, but they're not us. Something in the way he said it made Kelthar's skin flash warning colors. He watched the human transport return to the Defiant and felt a strange emotion he couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite hope, something in between. The next day, a Vrixtal scout force probed the coalition lines. Tae Yang requested permission to engage. Vross granted it, probably hoping the humans would learn a hard lesson about galactic warfare. Kelthar watched the battle from the command center. The human ships moved strangely, not in the formal battle formations the coalition used. They scattered like prey animals, appearing to flee. The Vrixtal pursuit predictably gave chase. Then the human ships turned, not as a coordinated unit, but in sequence, creating overlapping fields of fire. They didn't target the Vrixtal ships. They targeted their sensor arrays and communication nodes. In 3 minutes, the entire Vrixtal scout force was blind and deaf, cut off from the hive mind. The drones began acting erratically, unable to coordinate. The human ships methodically destroyed them one by one. 0 human casualties. Complete enemy elimination. Tactics that violated every rule of honorable warfare. Kelthar watched Commander Tae Yang's face on the communication screen and finally understood his earlier unease. The humans weren't here to assist. They weren't here to follow coalition protocols. They were here to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. They were here to teach civilized species how to truly make war. Kelthar had never been on a battlefield before. As a diplomat, he observed wars from safe command centers, reading casualty reports and negotiating treaties. But when Commander Tai Yang invited him to join a reconnaissance mission, the Council ordered him to accept. They wanted first-hand observations of human tactics. Now he crouched in a damaged supply station on the moon of Keltar 4, wondering if this had been a terrible mistake. "Stay low and stay quiet," Jisoo whispered beside him. The human woman commanded the Special Operations Team, and Kelthar noticed immediately that she was different from Taeyang and Hai-In. Where they were still and controlled, Jisoo vibrated with contained energy. Cybernetic implants traced lines along her arms and neck, glowing faintly in the darkness. "The Vrixtal patrol comes through every 4 hours," Jisoo continued. "We've been watching them for 3 days." 3 days. The team had been hiding in this ruined station for 3 days, observing enemy patterns. Kelthar felt uncomfortable just thinking about it. Coalition forces gathered intelligence through sensors and drones, not by sitting in hostile territory. "Contact," someone whispered. It was Bomi, positioned at a window with a weapon that looked too large for her small frame. 6 drones, standard patrol formation." Kelthar activated his translator implant to watch his guide display the enemy approach. 6 massive insectoid forms scuttled across the lunar surface, each carrying enough firepower to level a building. His crystalline structure vibrated with fear. They were so close. "Quan, you're up," Jisoo said. A man with a scarred face grinned in the darkness. Quan carried strange devices that Kelthar didn't recognize. He moved to the station's entrance and began placing them carefully along the ground. "What is he doing?" Kelthar whispered. "Setting a trap," Jisoo replied. "The Vrixtal think they control this moon. They're about to learn differently." The patrol approached. Kelthar held his breath, certain they would be discovered. But the drones passed by without slowing, following their programmed route. Then Quan triggered his devices. The explosions weren't large, but they were precisely placed. The lead drone stumbled, its leg damaged. The others immediately clustered around it, following their hive instinct to protect wounded members. "Now," Jisoo said. Bomi fired once. The shot took the second drone directly in its sensory cluster. It collapsed. She fired again. Another drone fell. The remaining insects scattered, searching for the threat, but Bomi had already moved positions. She fired from a different window, and another drone died. The surviving drones retreated, dragging their damaged companion. They didn't call for reinforcements. They didn't investigate. They simply fled. "Why didn't you kill them all?" Kelthar asked, confused. "Because now they're scared," Quan said, still grinning. "Now they'll tell the hive that this area is dangerous. They'll avoid it or send larger patrols, which means pulling forces from other areas. Either way, we win." "That's psychological warfare," Kelthar said slowly. "You're not just fighting them physically. You're fighting their minds." "Their mind," Jisoo corrected. "Singular. The hive thinks as one, which means fear spreads through the entire network. We've been conducting operations like this across 12 moons. The swarm is starting to see threats everywhere." Kelthar felt disturbed by the implications. Coalition warfare had rules, protocols, honor codes developed over thousands of years. Humans apparently had none of these constraints. Over the next week, Kelthar accompanied different human teams. He watched Quan rig entire facilities with explosives, turning the Vrixtal's own supply stations into traps. He observed Bomi lying motionless in a sniper position for 47 hours straight, waiting for a single high-value target. He saw Jisoo's team fake their own deaths, playing dead among real corpses, then ambushing Vrixtal forces that came to investigate. The tactics horrified him. They violated every principle of civilized warfare. But they worked. The first major engagement came suddenly. A Vrixtal fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of a coalition supply convoy. The standard response would be for the convoy to scatter while military ships moved to intercept. Instead, the human escort ships did something unexpected. They charged directly at the swarm fleet. Kelthar watched from the command center as 30 human ships raced toward 300 Vrixtal drones. It looked like suicide. High Commander Vross called it suicide. Even Kelthar, who had begun to respect human capabilities, thought they had made a fatal mistake. Then the human ships split apart, each one taking a different trajectory. They wove through the Vrixtal formation like water flowing around rocks. Coalition ships fought in tight formations for mutual protection. Human ships fought alone, each captain making independent decisions. The Vrixtal couldn't adapt. Their hive mind expected coordinated enemy movements. Individual human ships were too unpredictable, each one using different tactics. Some fired and retreated, others closed to point-blank range. A few simply rammed damaged Vrixtal ships, the human crews ejecting at the last second. When the battle ended 20 minutes later, the swarm fleet was destroyed. The humans lost 4 ships with casualties of 83 personnel. A coalition force would have lost 20 ships and over 1,000 lives in the same engagement. "How?" Vross demanded during the after-action briefing. "How are you doing this?" Commander Tae Yang stood before the assembled coalition leadership, his expression calm as always. "We study our enemy. We've dissected Vrixtal drones. We've analyzed their communication patterns. We've tested their reaction times and mapped their decision trees. We know how they think." "In 1 week?" Vross said incredulously. "We've been fighting them for 3 solar cycles." "You've been fighting them," Hei-In said from beside Tae Yang. "We've been learning them. There's a difference." She activated a holographic display showing detailed Vrixtal anatomy, communication frequencies, behavioral patterns, and tactical tendencies. The amount of data was staggering. Kelthar realized the humans had learned more about the swarm in 7 days than the coalition had learned in 3 cycles. "They have 17 distinct sensory organs," Hei-In continued. "Destroy the primary cluster, and they're effectively blind for 3 seconds while backup systems activate. Their communication relies on pheromone trails for close-range coordination. Disrupt the trails, and individual drones become confused. Their exoskeletons are strongest at the joints but weakest between segment plates. Armor-piercing rounds at correct angles penetrate 73% of the time." She went on for 20 minutes, dissecting the Vrixtal with clinical precision. Kelthar watched the coalition officers growing increasingly uncomfortable. The humans spoke about the enemy the way a scientist might discuss an interesting specimen. There was no hatred, no fear, just cold analysis. "You've been fighting to prove your military honor," Tae Yang said when Hei-In finished. "We're not interested in honor. We're interested in going home alive. The swarm doesn't care about fair fights or proper protocols. Neither do we." That night, Kelthar found himself alone with Tae Yang in the human flagship's observation deck. The commander stood before the large viewport, watching the distant battle lines. "Your people disturbed the coalition leadership," Kelthar said carefully. "They think you fight without honor." "They're right," Tae Yang said simply. "Honor is a luxury for species that can afford it. Humans learned a long time ago that survival matters more than how you achieve it." "On your homeworld?" Kelthar asked. Tae Yang nodded. "Humans spent 10,000 years at war with each other. Every nation, every tribe, every city at some point fought for survival. We developed thousands of ways to kill, to deceive, to win against impossible odds. We're very, very good at warfare because we've never stopped practicing." Kelthar struggled for words. "That's horrifying." "Yes," Tae Yang agreed. "It is, but it's also why we're still alive. Earth didn't make us strong, it made us adaptable. We learned to use every advantage, exploit every weakness, and never stop until the enemy couldn't threaten us anymore." He turned to face Kelthar directly. The coalition fights wars like sporting events with rules and referees. That works fine when everyone agrees to the same rules. But the Vrixtal don't know your rules. They only know survival. So we'll teach them about predators that are better at survival than they are. Kelthar looked at the human commander and felt something shift in his understanding. The humans weren't savage. They were experienced. The galaxy had known peace for so long that it had forgotten what real warfare looked like. Humans had never forgotten. They had carried it with them into the stars. "I'll need to report this to the council," Kelthar said. "Report whatever you like," Tae Yang said. "Just make sure they understand one thing. We're not here to follow their rules. We're here to win their war." The alert came at 400 hours, ship time. Kelthar jolted awake in his quarters aboard the Coalition flagship, his crystalline structure flashing confusion colors before he fully processed the sirens. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Vrixtal forces incoming on 3 vectors." He rushed to the command center where chaos greeted him. The tactical display showed red everywhere. 3 massive swarm fleets had dropped out of faster-than-light travel simultaneously, hitting the coalition defensive line at its weakest points. "Estimated enemy strength?" High Commander Vross demanded. "Over 2,000 capital ships," the sensor officer reported, his voice shaking. "Drone count unknown. Our systems can't track them all." 2,000 ships. The coalition had maybe 400 combat-ready vessels in the entire sector. This wasn't a battle. It was an extinction event. "All ships, begin retreat protocols," Vross ordered. "Fall back to secondary defensive positions." "The human fleet is not retreating," the communications officer announced. "Commander Tae Yang reports they're moving to engage." "Engage?" Vross spread his wings in disbelief. "There are 30 human ships. This is madness." But the humans weren't asking for permission. On the tactical display, their ships accelerated toward the nearest swarm fleet. Kelthar watched in horror as they dove straight into the enemy formation. "Get me Tai Yang!" Vross snapped. The human commander's face appeared on the screen. Calm, despite the chaos visible on his bridge behind him. "Commander, this is suicide," Vross said. "Pull your forces back immediately." "We didn't come here to run," Tae Yang replied simply. "Besides, someone needs to slow them down while your ships evacuate civilians." The connection cut before Vross could respond. The avian commander stood silent for a moment, then made a sound that might have been respect or grief. "All coalition ships," he said quietly. "Maintain defensive positions. We stand with the humans." Kelthar found himself transported to the surface of Keltar 3, the planet the Vrixtal were targeting. The Council wanted ground-level observations, and he was the only liaison embedded with human forces. He materialized in the middle of a forward operating base where hundreds of human Marines prepared defensive positions. A muscular man with sergeant stripes approached him. "Ambassador Kelthar? I'm Young, Marine Corps leader. You'll be with my unit." "I'm just here to observe," Kelthar said quickly. "I'm not a combatant." "Neither are the civilians behind us," Young replied, gesturing toward the city visible in the distance. 2 million people who can't evacuate in time, so we hold this position until they're safe." Kelthar looked at the defensive line. Maybe 300 human Marines against an invasion force that would number in the thousands. "This is impossible." "Probably," Young agreed. "We'll do it anyway." The Vrixtal landing craft began descending an hour later. They fell like rain, blocking out the sun. Kelthar had never seen so many enemies in one place. His crystalline structure flashed pure white with terror. "Steady," Young called to his troops. "Remember your training. Aim for the sensory clusters. Stay in your firing positions. Support your squad mates." The first wave hit like a tsunami. Thousands of Vrixtal drones charged across the open ground toward the human positions. The Marines opened fire with disciplined volleys, each shot carefully aimed. Drones fell, but more took their place. Kelthar watched in amazement as the humans held their ground. He had seen coalition forces break and run from smaller attacks, but the Marines didn't retreat. They fought with a fierce determination that seemed almost religious. A drone broke through the line, heading straight for Kelthar. He froze, unable to move. Then Yong was there, his rifle firing in quick succession. The drone collapsed 5 meters away. "Stay behind cover," Yong ordered, pulling Kelthar into a fortified bunker. The battle raged for hours. Kelthar lost track of time in the chaos of explosions and weapons fire. He saw humans fighting with injuries that would have incapacitated any coalition species. He watched a Marine with a broken arm still firing her weapon one-handed. He observed soldiers carrying wounded comrades while under fire, refusing to leave anyone behind. A young woman in medical gear rushed past, heading toward a group of injured Marines in an exposed position. "Sumin, wait!" Yong shouted. "It's too dangerous!" But Sumin didn't stop. She reached the wounded and began treating them even as weapons fire kicked up dirt around her. Kelthar watched in disbelief as she performed emergency surgery while the battle raged overhead. When she finished, other Marines provided covering fire while she dragged the injured to safety. "Why?" Kelthar asked Yong. "Why risk more lives for soldiers already wounded?" Yong looked at him as if he had asked why water was wet. "Because they're ours. We don't leave our people behind. Not ever." The concept was alien to Kelthar. Coalition military doctrine prioritized overall force preservation. Individual casualties were acceptable losses. But humans apparently didn't think that way. Every single life mattered to them. The defensive line held for 12 hours, then 24, then 48. The Marines rotated positions but never retreated. They fought with an endurance that shouldn't have been possible. Kelthar saw soldiers go days without sleep, their bodies pushed to limits that would kill most species. On the second day, Kelthar himself was injured. A piece of shrapnel from an explosion caught him across his shoulder section, cracking his crystalline structure. He fell, pain shooting through his system. Immediately, 3 Marines surrounded him. One returned fire while the other 2 pulled him to safety. They shielded him with their own bodies, putting themselves between him and the enemy. "You don't have to," Kelthar gasped. "I'm not even your species." "Doesn't matter," one Marine replied. "You're with us. That makes you ours." Sumin treated his injury with the same care she gave to human casualties. "You'll be fine," she assured him. "The cut isn't deep. Your people's biology is fascinating, by the way. I've never worked on crystalline structures before." She said it casually, as if they weren't in the middle of a war zone. As if death wasn't falling from the sky around them. The humans treated danger as a normal part of existence. Above the planet, the space battle reached its critical point. Captain Day commanded one of the human frigates, his ship heavily damaged from days of constant fighting. Kelthar monitored the battle reports and watched with growing dread as the Vrixtal forces concentrated on Day's position. "Captain, your ship is critically damaged," Tae Yang's voice came over the communication channel. "Eject your crew and abandon vessel." "Negative, Commander," Day replied. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I'm looking at that Vrixtal carrier at coordinates 773. If I angle my approach just right—" "Captain, that's an order," Tae Yang said, emotion breaking through his usual control for the first time. "Abandon ship." "Sir, with respect, this is my ship. My choice." Day's vessel turned, angling toward the massive Vrixtal carrier. "Been an honor serving with you all. Tell my family I love them." The frigate accelerated, pushing its damaged engines past any safe limit. It struck the carrier amidships, and both vessels erupted in a fireball visible from the planet's surface. The explosion created a gap in the swarm formation. Coalition ships poured through, breaking the enemy encirclement. The tide of battle shifted. On the ground, Yong gathered his Marines. They had been fighting for 52 hours straight. Their faces showed exhaustion, but their eyes remained sharp and focused. "The evacuation is complete," Yong announced. "All civilians are safe. Now we can pull back to secondary positions." The Marines cheered, not because they had won, but because they had accomplished their mission. 2 million civilians lived because 300 humans had refused to give up. Kelthar sat among them, his injury treated, and tried to understand what he had witnessed. These humans had fought in conditions that should have broken any rational being. They had held impossible positions. They had sacrificed themselves for strangers of other species. They had refused to abandon their wounded or retreat, even when defeat seemed certain. "Why do you fight this way?" he asked Yong. "Why endure such suffering?" Yong looked at the city in the distance, where lights were coming back on as power was restored. "Because if we don't, who will? Someone has to stand between good people and the things that want to hurt them. Might as well be us." It was the simplest and most profound military doctrine Kelthar had ever heard. Not fighting for glory or conquest or honor. Fighting because it needed to be done. Fighting because others couldn't. As medical transports arrived to evacuate the wounded, Kelthar watched Sumin treating both human and alien casualties with equal care. He saw Marines sharing their rations with coalition soldiers. He observed Yong personally checking on each of his people, making sure they received treatment and rest. The humans were winning this war, but Kelthar was beginning to understand that victory meant something different to them than it did to other species. They didn't just want to defeat the Vrixtal, they wanted to protect everyone behind them, every planet, every species, every civilian who couldn't protect themselves. They were warriors, yes, but they were also guardians, and that combination was more powerful than any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. 3 weeks after the desperate defense of Keltar III, Kelthar stood in a coalition strategy meeting that would change everything. High Commander Vross had called together every senior military leader, and for the first time humans were being included in top-level planning. Commander Tai Yang arrived with Hai In and several other officers Kelthar hadn't met. They carried data files and wore expressions that made Kelthar nervous. He had learned to read human faces better now, and these ones spoke of secrets about to be revealed. "We have a problem," Vross began the meeting. "The Vrixtal swarm is regrouping faster than we can damage them. Every battle costs them less than it costs us. At current rates, we'll run out of ships before they do." The assembled coalition officers murmured agreement. It was the grim mathematics of extinction. Even with human tactics improving their performance, simple numbers would eventually overwhelm them. "We disagree with your assessment," Hai-In said, standing. "You're not losing this war." "Explain," Vross demanded. Hai-In activated a holographic display. "For the past 3 weeks, you thought we were fighting alongside you. We were. But we were also doing something else. We were learning everything we could about the Vrixtal." The display showed battle data, but not the kind Kelthar expected. It included biological samples, communication intercepts, behavioral analysis, and fleet movement patterns going back to before humans had even arrived. "Every engagement we fought," Hai-In continued, "we were testing theories. We intentionally prolonged some battles to observe swarm reactions. We captured drones alive to study their connection to the hive mind. We tracked every queenship signature we could find." "You what?" Vross stood, wings flaring. "You risked coalition lives for experiments?" "We risked human lives," Tai Yang corrected calmly. "Every dangerous test, every risky capture operation, we conducted ourselves. We never asked coalition forces to take unnecessary risks." Kelthar felt a chill run through his crystalline structure. The humans had been fighting 2 campaigns simultaneously, the obvious military one and a hidden intelligence operation. A new human stepped forward. She was small with sharp eyes that seemed to see through everything. I'm Nay Young, Intelligence Division. We've spent 3 weeks breaking Vrixtal communication codes. As of yesterday, we can understand everything they transmit to each other. The room fell silent. Communication intercepts were basic intelligence gathering, but actually understanding an alien hive mind's language was nearly impossible. The Vrixtal had defied Coalition cryptographers for 3 solar cycles. Show us, Vross said slowly. Nayang played recorded Vrixtal transmissions, now translated into Coalition standard language. The communications revealed fleet positions, Queen ship locations, supply routes, and tactical priorities. It was a complete map of enemy operations. How? Someone asked. Humans are very good at breaking codes, Nayang said simply. We've had thousands of years of practice. The Vrixtal communication system is complex but logical. Once we understood the basic structure, the rest followed. Another human officer stood. He was lean and moved like a shadow. Jinwu Infiltration Specialist. My teams have been inside Vrixtal-controlled territory for 2 weeks. We've mapped their staging areas, identified their supply chains, and located 17 Queen ships. Inside their territory? Kelthar couldn't help asking. How did you get past their defenses? Jinwu smiled slightly. We didn't go past them. We went through them. Vrixtal drones rely on pheromone identification. Coat yourself in the right chemicals, move like they move, and they think you're just another drone. Their hive mind doesn't waste processing power double-checking every individual member. The implications staggered Kelthar. Humans had people walking among the enemy, gathering intelligence while the swarm remained completely unaware. This is insane, Vross said, but his tone had shifted from anger to something else. This level of intelligence gathering should take years. You had years, Heian said bluntly. You gathered data but didn't use it aggressively. We've synthesized everything the Coalition learned plus everything we discovered in 3 weeks, and we found their weakness. She changed the holographic display to show Vrixtal fleet structure. Queen ships aren't just command centers, they're processing hubs. Each queen coordinates between 2,000 and 5,000 drones. Kill a queen, and those drones lose coordination for approximately 73 minutes before a new queen can be birthed and reach operational capacity. We know this, Vross said, but queen ships are impossible to reach. Not if you hit multiple queens simultaneously, Taeyang said. The hive mind can handle losing 1 queen and redistributing control. But if you kill 5 queens at the same moment across different sectors, the entire network becomes overloaded trying to reorganize. Heian highlighted 17 targets. These are confirmed queen ship locations. We propose a coordinated strike hitting all 17 simultaneously. Combined Coalition and human forces, precise timing, maximum aggression. 17 targets spread across 12 star systems, Vross calculated quickly. We don't have the ships. Yes, you do, Taeyang replied. You've been holding reserve fleets back, protecting core systems. Commit everything. 1 massive offensive. If we succeed, we break the swarm's coordination across the entire sector. If we fail, we were going to lose anyway. The room erupted in argument. Coalition officers debated the plan's merits, risks, and probability of success. Some called it brilliant, others called it suicide. Kelthar simply watched the humans standing calmly amid the chaos, waiting. Finally, Vross raised a wing for silence. This plan violates our military doctrine. We don't launch aggressive campaigns, we defend and hold. Your military doctrine is why you were losing, Heian said. The Vrixtal are predators. You can't beat a predator by hiding. You have to become a bigger predator. Kelthar saw something pass across Vross's face. It might have been the moment he truly understood what humans were offering. Not just tactics or weapons, but a complete paradigm shift in how civilized species approached warfare. If we do this, Vross said slowly, We commit everything. There's no retreat, no backup plan. That's correct, Tae-Yang agreed. We win, or we die fighting. Those are the only two options we're offering. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. The coalition would launch its first major offensive operation in over a century. The next 72 hours were chaos. Ships moved into position. Human intelligence officers briefed coalition commanders on targets. Jin Woo's infiltration teams marked Queen ships for targeting. Nayoung's people listened to Vrixtal communications, tracking enemy movements in real time. Kelthar found himself aboard Tae-Yang's flagship for the operation. He watched as human and coalition forces coordinated their attack with precision that seemed impossible for such a diverse alliance. 30 seconds to operation start, Hayin announced. All units report ready. Kelthar looked at the tactical display showing 17 simultaneous battles about to begin. It was beautiful and terrifying. Begin, Tae-Yang ordered. Across 12 star systems, the strike forces attacked. Human ships led each assault, using their aggressive tactics to punch through swarm defenses. Coalition vessels followed, adding firepower and holding positions. But the humans had one more trick. As the battles raged, Na Young's team began broadcasting captured Vrixtal distress calls. They played recordings of queens under attack, calling for help, screaming in frequencies that triggered panic responses in drones. The swarm's communication network filled with false alarms. Drones received contradictory orders. Some rushed to defend queens that weren't actually threatened. Others abandoned their positions thinking their queen was already dead. The hive mind, so effective at coordination, became its own worst enemy as false information cascaded through the system. It's working, Hayin reported, watching her displays. Enemy coordination dropping across all sectors. One by one, the queen ships fell. Each death sent ripples through the swarm network. Drones became confused, aggressive, panicked. They attacked each other. They fled into empty space. They froze, waiting for orders that never came. The 17th queen died 43 minutes after the operation began. The Vrixtal swarm, which had threatened to consume half the galaxy, collapsed like a house built on sand. Coalition ships pursued the scattered remnants, destroying disorganized drones that no longer posed a coordinated threat. In 6 hours, they accomplished what 3 solar cycles of defensive warfare couldn't. They broke the swarm's back. Aboard the flagship, Tae-Yang watched the battle reports with no expression of triumph, just quiet satisfaction of a job completed. "How did you know it would work?" Kelthar asked him. "We didn't," Tae-Yang admitted. "But we understood something you didn't. The Vrixtal aren't warriors. They're insects that evolved size and intelligence. They rely on their hive mind because individually they're weak. Take away that coordination, and they're just big bugs. You gambled billions of lives on a theory." "No," Tae-Yang corrected. "We gambled on human understanding of warfare. We've fought hive minds before on Earth, army ants, termite colonies, even coordinated human armies. We know how to disrupt group coordination. The Vrixtal were just another opponent using tactics we'd seen before." Kelthar looked at this calm human who had just orchestrated the greatest military victory in coalition history and finally understood why the galaxy should fear them. Not because they were violent or cruel, but because they were experienced. They had seen every kind of warfare. They had practiced every kind of killing. And they had brought all that terrible knowledge into the stars with them. The victory celebrations lasted 3 days across coalition space. Cities erupted in joy. Planets that had prepared for evacuation instead prepared festivals. For the first time in 3 solar cycles, the galaxy could sleep without fear of the Vrixtal swarm. Kelthar attended the official ceremonies, watched as medals were distributed and speeches were made. High Commander Vross gave a particularly moving address about courage and sacrifice. But Kelthar found himself distracted, thinking about the humans who stood quietly at the back of the ceremony hall, uncomfortable with all the attention. On the fourth day after the victory, Kelthar visited the human memorial service. It was held on a simple transport ship, not in the grand halls where coalition ceremonies took place. He had received no invitation but felt compelled to attend. The room was plain, filled with perhaps 200 human personnel. At the front stood a wall displaying names and faces. Kelthar counted them silently. 417 humans had died in the 3 weeks of fighting. Commander Tae-yang stood before the memorial, his usual calm broken by something raw and painful. "We came to help," he said quietly. 417 of us won't go home. They gave everything so that others could live, humans and non-humans alike. They didn't ask who they were protecting. They just protected. He called each name one by one. After each name, someone in the crowd shared a memory. Kelthar heard about Captain Day, who loved ancient music and collected antique instruments. About Su Min, who had dreamed of becoming a civilian doctor but joined the military to save lives in combat. About Marines who wrote poetry, engineers who painted, soldiers who had families waiting for them. They weren't just warriors, they were people. The realization struck Kelthar with unexpected force. He had spent weeks watching humans fight with such efficiency that he had begun thinking of them as living weapons. But they grieved, they remembered, they hurt. After the ceremony, Kelthar found Tae-yang alone in an observation deck. "I'm sorry for your losses," he said. Tae-yang nodded slowly. 417. I know all their names. I approved the orders that put them in danger. I'll carry that weight for the rest of my life. But you won, Kelthar said. You saved billions. Does that make the 417 less dead? Tae-yang asked. Victory has a price. Humans learned that lesson thousands of years ago. We win, but we never forget what winning costs. They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Kelthar asked the question that had been troubling him for weeks. Why do you fight this way? Your tactics, your aggression, your willingness to sacrifice, where does it come from? Tae-yang was quiet for a long time. Earth, he finally said. Our homeworld made us what we are. We evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We were also prey, hunted by bigger predators. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, more determined than anything else on our planet. He gestured to the stars beyond the viewport. Then we started fighting each other. 10,000 years of continuous warfare. Nations rose and fell. Empires conquered and crumbled. We developed thousands of ways to kill, to deceive, to win. We learned psychological warfare, guerrilla tactics, total war, tactical deception. We studied every battle, learned from every defeat, adapted from every victory. That sounds horrifying, Kelthar said. It was, Tae-yang agreed, but it taught us something important. Warfare isn't about honor or glory. It's about survival. When you fight to ensure the enemy can never threaten you again. Not because you hate them, but because you love what you're protecting too much to risk losing. Kelthar thought about the Marines at Keltar 3, holding impossible positions. About Captain Day ramming his ship into the enemy. About humans fighting with injuries that should have been fatal. You fight until the threat is eliminated completely. Yes, Tae-yang said. The coalition has been peaceful for so long that you forgot what real war looks like. You developed honor codes and proper protocols because you could afford to. But the Vrixtal didn't care about your rules, neither do we. We fight the way we were taught, with everything we have until nothing threatens us anymore. Over the next few days, Kelthar continued his observations. He watched human engineers helping rebuild coalition stations. He saw human medics treating alien casualties with the same care they gave their own. He observed human soldiers teaching coalition forces their tactics, sharing knowledge freely. He found Hei-in a strategy room, working with coalition officers on defensive improvements. You're teaching them your methods, Kelthar noted. Of course, Hay-In replied. The Vrixtal are broken, but there will be other threats. The coalition needs to be ready. Aren't you worried about sharing your advantages? Hay-In looked at him with surprise. Ambassador, we're allies now. Your survival is our survival. If the coalition falls, humanity falls with it. We're stronger together. It was another piece of the puzzle. Humans fought with terrifying efficiency, but they also protected with the same intensity. They didn't just defeat enemies, they defended friends. The Galactic Council called Kelthar home to make his full report. He stood before the assembled leaders of 200 species and struggled to find words for what he had witnessed. The humans are unlike any species we've encountered, he began. They approach warfare with a combination of intelligence and aggression that seems contradictory but is devastatingly effective. They study their enemies with scientific precision. They fight without concern for honor or protocol. They sacrifice themselves to protect others without hesitation. Are they a threat to the coalition? Someone asked. Kelthar considered the question carefully. Yes, he said honestly. If humanity ever becomes our enemy, we would face an opponent unlike anything in our history. They have 10,000 years of warfare experience. They think in ways we don't understand. They're willing to do things we consider taboo. The council chamber filled with worried murmurs. But, Kelthar continued, I also watched them weep for their dead. I saw them risk their lives to save coalition soldiers they had just met. I observed them sharing their knowledge freely to make their allies stronger. They are dangerous, yes, but they're dangerous in defense of others, not in conquest of them. He activated a display showing the battle records. Humans don't fight until they win. They fight until the enemy can never threaten them or their allies again. That's terrifying if you're their enemy. But if you're their friend, it means they'll fight beyond any rational limit to protect you. High Counselor Velthar, an ancient reptilian being, spoke slowly. Are you recommending we accept them fully into the coalition? I'm recommending we never ever make them our enemies, Kelthar said firmly. And yes, full membership with military partnership. They saved us. They'll save us again if needed. The price is simply accepting that they don't fight the way we prefer. But their way wins wars. The vote wasn't immediate. The council debated for hours. Some species feared human aggression. Others worried about their unconventional methods. But eventually, practical concerns won out. The Vrixtal had nearly destroyed the coalition using tactics that violated civilized warfare. Only humans, with their uncivilized approach, had stopped them. The vote passed. Humanity received full coalition membership and a permanent seat on the Military Command Council. When Kelthar returned to human space to deliver the news, he found Tai Yang on his flagship, preparing for departure. The council accepted, Kelthar told him. You're full members now. Good, Tai Yang said simply. Will you stay on as liaison? If you'll have me, I want to continue learning about your people. Tai Yang smiled slightly. You're afraid of us. Yes, Kelthar admitted, but I also respect you, and I think I'm beginning to understand you. What do you understand? Kelthar thought about everything he had witnessed. The violence and the compassion, the efficiency and the grief, the terrible capability for destruction paired with desperate desire to protect. You're the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, he said slowly. You evolved on a world that tried to kill you, fought each other for thousands of years, and brought all that violence into space. You know more about warfare than any species should. You're willing to do things we consider unthinkable. He paused, finding the right words. But you're also the most fiercely protective beings I've ever met. You fight like monsters to defend like angels. You're predators who chose to guard instead of hunt. That combination is what makes you truly terrifying and truly valuable. Tae Yang was quiet for a moment. "That's the best description of humanity I've ever heard from a non-human," he said finally. "Yes, Ambassador. You can continue as liaison. I think we have much more to learn from each other." That night, Kelthar made his final journal entry about the experience. He wrote about the battles, the tactics, the victory, but he kept returning to one central thought. "I witnessed humans enter the battlefield," he wrote, "and understood why the galaxy fears them. They fight with an efficiency born from 10,000 years of warfare. They use tactics we consider savage. They sacrifice without hesitation and endure without breaking. They study their enemies until they find every weakness, then exploit those weaknesses without mercy." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "But I also saw them weep for their fallen, laugh with their comrades, and die protecting species they had just met. They are the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, capable of violence beyond our comprehension. And I am grateful, deeply grateful, that they chose to be our allies rather than our enemies." He saved the file and looked out at the stars where human ships patrolled alongside coalition vessels, protecting a galaxy that was still learning to understand them. The humans had come to the battlefield and changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same, and perhaps, Kelthar thought, that was exactly what it needed.